I always knew my family saw me as invisible, but I never thought my own sister would try to make me disappear permanently. It started at dinner. 15 minutes after eating, my throat began to close. My skin burned. My lungs screamed for air that wouldn't come. I stumbled toward the door, gasping, clawing at my neck, and that's when I heard the lock click. Candace stood behind me, arms crossed, watching me collapse. "Stop faking it," she said, her voice cold as stone. "You just want attention before the will reading. You want Grandpa's money." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. My vision blurred as I hit the floor. The paramedics arrived just in time, but one of them, Jordan, saw something that night. Something he recorded. Something that would destroy every lie my sister had built. 3 days later, at Grandpa's will reading, everyone expected me to walk away with nothing. My mother, my sister, even me. Then Jordan stood up and said 5 words that changed everything. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you? My name is Stephanie Cooper. I'm 36 years old, a head nurse at one of the largest hospitals in Philadelphia. I've spent 15 years caring for strangers in their darkest moments, holding hands during final breaths, delivering news that shattered families staying calm when everything around me was falling apart. But nothing in my career prepared me for what happened when I went home. The drive from Philadelphia to my hometown in Ohio took 6 hours. 6 hours of empty highways and old memories I had tried to bury. I hadn't been back in almost 2 years, not since Grandpa's stroke. Work was my excuse, but the truth was simpler. That house had never felt like home. Not for me. I pulled into the driveway late afternoon the day before Grandpa's will reading. No one came out to greet me. Through the window, I could see my younger sister Candace sitting in the living room with her husband Derek, neither of them looking up. Mother opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes passed over me like I was a stranger. "Your room is upstairs," she said. No hug, no warmth, just directions, as if I were a guest who had already overstayed. But then Grandma appeared, 82 years old, frail from months of caring for Grandpa before his death. She moved toward me with surprising energy. She wrapped her thin arms around me and held on tight. "He asked for you," she whispered into my ear. "Every single day at the end. He only asked for you." I felt the shift in the room immediately, a coldness radiating from where Candace sat. Her expression hardened, though she said nothing. That night I went downstairs for water and overheard Derek and Candace arguing in the kitchen. Derek's voice was sharp, almost cruel. "We're losing the house in 60 days. The bank isn't negotiating anymore. You need to handle this, Candace. I don't care how." Candace's response was barely audible. "I know. I'll fix it. I promise." I retreated to my room, my heart heavy. Poor Candace, I thought. Derek was the problem. He was pushing her, controlling her. Whatever tension existed between us, she was clearly suffering under his pressure. The next morning, our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, visited to offer condolences. She pulled me aside while Mother made coffee. "Your grandfather was very distressed in his final weeks," she said quietly. "He told me someone in the family was pressuring him to sign papers he didn't want to sign." Her eyes softened. "But he always spoke of you with such pride, Stephanie. He said you had his heart." Before I could respond, Candace appeared and guided Mrs. Thompson toward the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Later, I noticed my room had been searched, drawers slightly open, clothes shifted. I assumed someone was looking for documents related to the inheritance. I didn't think to check my medical bag. I didn't think to check if my EpiPens were still there. What I didn't know was that Grandma had been awake the night before long after I went to bed. As she walked past Candace's room, she heard my sister on the phone, not with Derek, but someone else. Candace's voice was chillingly calm. "She's severely allergic to cashews. If something happens at dinner tomorrow, she won't make it to the will reading. Problem solved." Grandma froze in horror. Early the next morning, she confronted my mother in the kitchen. "I heard what Candace is planning. She's going to hurt Stephanie. You have to stop this." Mother waved her hand dismissively. "You're being paranoid. Candace is stressed about money, but she would never actually hurt anyone. Stop making drama." Grandma realized then that she was alone. Mother would not help. So she began preparing to protect me herself the only way she knew how. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong in this house, but I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, what reason would anyone have to hurt me? I was the sister who had nothing, the one they had already forgotten. I had no idea that the trap had already been set and that the only person fighting to save me was an 82-year-old woman who no one believed. The next evening, something strange happened. Candace offered to cook dinner. In all my 36 years, I could count on one hand the number of times my sister had voluntarily entered a kitchen. She had always been the princess of our family, the one who was served, never the one who served. But that night she insisted. She smiled at me with a warmth I hadn't seen since we were children, and said she wanted to do something special for the family before the will reading tomorrow. She said it was time we acted like sisters again. I wanted to believe her. Despite everything, despite the years of coldness, and the way she looked through me like I was made of glass, part of me still wanted my little sister back. So when she set the table with candles and brought out an elaborate chicken dish covered in creamy sauce, I felt something soften in my chest. Maybe I had been wrong about her. Maybe the financial stress had pushed her to a breaking point, and now she was trying to find her way back. Derek sat at the head of the table, scrolling through his phone, barely paying attention. Mother took her usual seat, her expression unreadable. And Grandma watched the food with eyes that seemed too alert, too focused. She hadn't touched her plate. I noticed, but didn't understand why. I looked down at the sauce glistening on the chicken. Something flickered in the back of my mind, a nurse's instinct. I turned to Candace and asked the question I had asked 100 times throughout our lives. There aren't any cashews in this, right? You know about my allergy. My allergy wasn't minor. It wasn't the kind that gave you a rash or made you uncomfortable. Cashews could kill me. Everyone in my family knew this. They had known since I was 7 years old and nearly died at a birthday party. Candace laughed, and the sound was light and sisterly. Of course I remember, she said. I used almonds in the sauce. I would never put you at risk, Steph. You're my sister. I believed her. God help me, I believed her. The chicken was delicious. The sauce was rich and creamy, and I had 2 helpings because it had been so long since anyone in my family had made me feel welcome. We talked about small things, the weather, old memories, neighbors, who had moved away. For one brief hour, I felt like I belonged. And then 15 minutes after dinner, my throat began to tighten. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Stress, maybe. The tension of being back in this house. But then my skin started to flush. Heat spread across my chest and up my neck. My lips began to tingle, and I knew. I knew with the certainty of someone who had lived with this fear her entire life. This was anaphylaxis. This was cashews, not almonds. Cashews. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I tried to speak to say what was happening, but my throat was already swelling. I stumbled toward the stairs, my vision starting to blur. I needed my EpiPen. I always carried 2, one in the main pocket of my medical bag, one in the side pocket. I had been a nurse for 15 years. I never went anywhere without them. I reached my room and tore open my medical bag. The main pocket was empty. I checked the side pocket, my hands shaking so badly I could barely work the zipper. Also empty. Both EpiPens were gone. Both of them. I hadn't checked after my room was searched. I had assumed someone was looking for documents. I never imagined someone was looking for the one thing that could save my life. The trap had been set the moment I arrived. I stumbled back downstairs, gasping, clutching the railing to keep from falling. Every breath felt like swallowing broken glass. I reached the living room and tried to speak, tried to beg for help. The words came out as a ragged whisper. Call 911. Please, I can't breathe. Derek looked up from his phone and his face went white. He jumped to his feet, his voice rising in panic. What's happening? Candace, call 911 right now. He wasn't acting. His confusion was real. His fear was real. He had no idea what was going on. But Candace didn't move. She stood in the doorway to the kitchen, her arms crossed over her chest, watching me gasp for air, like I was putting on a show for her entertainment. Her voice was cold, colder than I had ever heard it. She's faking, she said. She always does this for attention. She wants to ruin the will reading tomorrow. She wants everyone to feel sorry for her. I collapsed to my knees. Black spots swam in my vision. Through the haze of suffocating, I saw Derek staring at his wife like he had never seen her before. The red herring shattered in that moment. Derek wasn't the monster. He wasn't the mastermind pushing Candace to desperate measures. He was just a man who had married a woman he never truly knew. Candace had done this alone. Candace had planned this. Candace had looked me in the eyes and lied about almonds while she fed me the one thing that could kill me. Then I heard Grandma's voice cutting through the fog. She was screaming at Derek to call for help. When he fumbled with his phone, his hands shaking too badly to dial, she pulled out her own phone. She called 911 herself. And then she did something I didn't understand until later. She kept the phone up, the camera recording. She recorded Candace standing motionless while I choked on the floor. She recorded Derek's panicked confusion. She recorded the front door that Candace had quietly locked when no one was watching. And then Grandma said something that made the whole room go still. She said it loudly, clearly, making sure the recording captured every word. "Margaret, I told you this morning. I told you what Candace was planning. You said I was imagining things." I turned my head, fighting to stay conscious, and saw my mother standing against the wall. Her face was pale as paper. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She had no defense. She had no excuse. Grandma had warned her that morning. Grandma had heard Candace on the phone the night before planning this, and my mother had dismissed it. She had chosen not to believe it. She had chosen to do nothing. Grandma didn't wait for anyone else to act. She marched to the back door and unlocked it herself, throwing it open just as the paramedics came rushing up the driveway. They burst into the house with their equipment and found me on the floor, my lips turning blue, my body shutting down. One of the paramedics, a young man with steady hands and calm eyes, injected me with epinephrine while his partner secured my airway. I felt the medication hit my system like electricity, forcing my throat to open, forcing air back into my lungs. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, fighting to keep me stable, I heard Grandma's voice one more time. She was speaking to my mother, but she wanted everyone to hear. "I have everything on video," she said. "Everything she did. Everything she said." Then her voice broke, and through my fading consciousness I heard her final words, "And you, Margaret, you knew. I warned you this morning, and you chose to do nothing." The ceiling blurred above me as they carried me out. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was my sister's face in the doorway, and for the first time in her life, Candace looked afraid. I woke up to the sound of beeping machines and the smell of antiseptic. For a moment I didn't know where I was. The ceiling was white and unfamiliar. Then the memories came flooding back: the dinner, the tightening throat, the empty medical bag, Candace, standing with her arms crossed while I collapsed. I was in a hospital. I was alive. Somehow, despite everything my sister had done, I was still alive. A nurse noticed I was awake and explained that I had been unconscious for nearly 16 hours. The anaphylaxis had been severe. If the paramedics had arrived even 5 minutes later, I would not have survived. They were keeping me for 36 hours of observation to make sure there were no complications. The will reading had been postponed until I was discharged. I lay there in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had happened. My sister had tried to kill me, not in a moment of rage, not in a fit of passion, but with cold calculation. She had searched my room. She had stolen both of my EpiPens. She had lied about the almonds while feeding me cashews. She had locked the front door. And when I was dying on the floor in front of her, she had watched and done nothing. The first person to visit was Grandma. She appeared in the doorway looking 10 years older than she had 2 days ago. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was something else in them too, a fierce determination I had never seen before. She sat beside my bed and took my hand, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. Then she pulled out her phone. "I need to show you something," she said. "I recorded everything that night. I want you to see what really happened." She pressed play, and I watched the video with a growing sense of horror and clarity. There was Candace standing motionless while I gasped for air. There was Derek, his face twisted in genuine confusion and panic, clearly having no idea what was happening. There was my mother pressed against the wall, her face drained of color when Grandma accused her of knowing. And there was Grandma's voice loud and clear for the recording. "Margaret, I told you this morning. I told you what Candace was planning." When the video ended, I looked at Grandma with tears streaming down my face. "Why?" I whispered. "Why does she hate me so much?" Grandma squeezed my hand and took a deep breath. Your sister has hated you since you were children, she said. Not because of anything you did. You need to understand that. It was never about anything you did wrong. She paused, gathering her thoughts. It was because your grandfather loved you differently. He saw himself in you, your independence, your kindness, your refusal to play games. Every time he praised you, every time he asked about you, something in Candace broke a little more. She spent her whole life trying to earn what you had naturally. The money was never really the point. She wanted to erase you. You were the constant reminder that she could never be what he truly loved. I closed my eyes and let those words sink in. All those years of coldness, all those years of being treated like I was invisible, it had never been about me at all. It had been about a jealousy so deep that it had poisoned my sister's entire soul. Later that afternoon, I had an unexpected visitor. Derek appeared in the doorway looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. He was pale and unshaven, and his hands trembled as he sat down in the chair beside my bed. He couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't know, he said, his voice cracking. I swear to you, Stephanie, I had no idea what she was planning. I pushed her about the money. I was desperate about the house. We're about to lose everything, but I never imagined she would. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I studied his face, looking for deception, but all I saw was a broken man confronting the reality of who he had married. Why are you here, Derek? I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. About 3 months ago, Candace started having secret meetings with a notary. She told me it was estate planning to help your grandfather get his affairs in order. I believed her. I didn't ask questions. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were haunted. But after what happened at dinner, I started thinking. I'm not sure what she actually had him sign. I'm not even sure he signed anything at all. My blood ran cold. I had been so focused on surviving that I hadn't even considered this possibility. Candace hadn't just tried to kill me. She might have done something to Grandpa's will itself. The next morning, I received a phone call that confirmed my worst fears. It was from Mr. Harrison, my grandfather's attorney. He had heard about my hospitalization and wanted to speak with me urgently. His voice was grave as he explained what had happened in the weeks before Grandpa died. Your grandfather called me about 2 weeks before his passing, Mr. Harrison said. He was very distressed. He told me that someone in the family was pressuring him to sign documents he didn't fully understand. He felt trapped in his own home. The lawyer paused. He was afraid his final wishes would be overridden, so he took action. He asked me to arrange a secret meeting at the hospital during one of his checkups. There, with his doctor and attending nurse as witnesses, he signed a new addendum to his will. It declares that any documents signed under duress or coercion are invalid, and it names you, Stephanie, as his sole heir. I could barely breathe. Why didn't anyone know about this? Because he asked me to keep it confidential until the official reading, Mr. Harrison replied. He knew something was wrong. He just didn't know how wrong until it was too late. After I hung up, Grandma reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope. Your grandfather gave this to me before he died, she said quietly. He told me to give it to you only if something bad happened. I think this qualifies. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a handwritten letter from Grandpa, and beneath it were 2 photocopies of signatures. One was clearly his, the familiar steady handwriting I had seen on birthday cards my entire life. The other was shaky, uncertain, nothing like his natural hand. They were supposed to be the same signature. They were not even close. Someone had forged my grandfather's name on his will. I knew immediately who had done it. Candace and her notary meetings. Candace and her desperation. Candace, who had spent 3 months preparing to steal everything from a dying old man. For the first time in my life, I felt something shift inside me. I was done being the invisible sister. I was done being the victim. I called Mr. Harrison back and gave him very specific instructions. Reveal nothing at the will reading. Let Candace believe she has won. I spoke with a police detective who had been assigned to my case, and I asked her to wait until after the reading to approach my sister, and then I called Derek. Did you know about the forged signature? I asked him directly. His silence told me everything. He had suspected. He had chosen not to ask. Then you have a choice to make, I said quietly. Stay silent and be complicit in everything she's done, or tell the truth when it matters. The will reading is in 2 days. Decide what kind of man you want to be. I hung up and looked at the two signatures side by side, Grandpa's authentic handwriting next to the shaky, forced scrawl on the will Candace planned to present. My sister hadn't just tried to kill me. She had stolen our grandfather's final words and replaced them with her own lies. And I was going to let her believe she had won right up until the moment I took everything back. 2 days later, I walked through the front door of my family home for what I knew would be the last time. I had been discharged from the hospital that morning. The doctors had wanted me to rest for another day, but I told them I had somewhere important to be. I had a will reading to attend. The living room had been arranged for the occasion. Chairs were set up in a semicircle facing a small table where Mr. Harrison sat with his briefcase and documents. Mother was already seated, her hands folded in her lap, her expression carefully neutral. Grandma sat in the corner, clutching her phone like a weapon. Derek stood near the window, looking out at the yard, unable to meet anyone's eyes. And Candace sat in the center of the room like a queen awaiting her coronation. When I walked through the door, my sister's face went white. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear. She had expected me to stay away. She had expected me to be too weak, too traumatized, too broken to show up. She had underestimated me. She had always underestimated me. Mother spoke first. "Stephanie, should you really be here? You should be resting after your episode." She said the word like I had fainted from excitement rather than nearly died from deliberate poisoning. "We can tell you what happened afterward." I walked to an empty chair and sat down, keeping my voice perfectly calm. "I wouldn't miss this for anything. This is Grandpa's legacy. I want to hear every word." Candace's composure returned quickly. She smoothed her skirt and lifted her chin, confident that whatever I had planned, it wouldn't matter. She believed she had won. She believed the will in Mr. Harrison's briefcase would give her everything she wanted. She had no idea what was coming. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and opened his briefcase. He pulled out a document and began to read. "This is the last will and testament of Robert James Cooper, dated 4 months prior to his death." He read through the standard legal language, and then he reached the part everyone was waiting for: the distribution of assets. According to this will, Candace was to receive 80% of Grandpa's estate: the house, the savings accounts, the investments, everything of value. I was to receive a small cash gift of $5,000 and nothing more. The message was clear. I was an afterthought. I was the forgotten daughter, the invisible sister, worth nothing more than a token gesture. Candace couldn't hide her smile. It spread across her face like sunrise, triumphant and cruel. Mother nodded slowly, as if justice had finally been served, as if this was exactly what I deserved for being the daughter who left the sister who didn't play the family games. I sat in complete silence. My expression revealed nothing. I was waiting. Mr. Harrison set down the document and folded his hands. "However," he said, and his voice carried a weight that made everyone in the room go still, "I must inform you that there exists an addendum to this will. It was signed at Regional Medical Center 3 days before Mr. Cooper's death." Candace's smile vanished. "What addendum?" "There is no addendum. I would have known about any addendum." Mr. Harrison ignored her and continued reading. The addendum declared that the previous will was invalid due to coercion and undue influence. It stated that Robert Cooper had been pressured to sign documents against his wishes by a family member he did not name. And it declared that his entire estate, every penny, every piece of property, everything he owned, was to go to his granddaughter, Stephanie Cooper. The words he had written still echo in my mind. The only person in my family who never asked me for anything. The only one who visited because she loved me, not because she was waiting for me to die. The room exploded. Candace jumped to her feet, her face twisted with rage. "This is a lie. He was senile. He didn't know what he was signing. He wasn't mentally competent to make these decisions." Mr. Harrison remained perfectly calm. He reached into his briefcase and produced another document. "This is a certification from Dr. Michael Torres, Mr. Cooper's attending physician at Regional Medical Center. It confirms that at the time of signing the addendum, Mr. Cooper was in full possession of his mental faculties. The document was witnessed by Dr. Torres himself and by Nurse Patricia Hendricks. Both have provided sworn statements confirming Mr. Cooper's mental clarity and his explicit desire to change his will." Candace opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. I stood up slowly. "Mr. Harrison, may I have permission to present additional evidence?" He nodded. "Of course." I took Grandma's phone and connected it to the small television in the corner of the room. The screen flickered to life, and suddenly the room was filled with the sounds of that terrible night. The video played from Grandma's perspective, showing everything in terrible clarity. There I was, collapsed on the floor, gasping for breath. There was Candace standing with her arms crossed, making no move to help. Her voice came through the speakers, cold and dismissive. "She's faking. She always does this for attention. She wants to ruin the will reading tomorrow." The video showed Derek's panicked confusion, his genuine shock as he fumbled with his phone, trying to call for help. It showed the front door locked, preventing the paramedics from entering quickly, and then it captured Grandma's voice loud and clear and devastating. "Margaret, I told you this morning. I told you what Candace was planning. You said I was imagining things." Every head in the room turned toward my mother. Her face had gone gray. She looked like a woman watching her entire world collapse, because there it was, recorded forever proof that she had been warned, proof that Grandma had told her that morning what Candace intended to do, proof that my mother had dismissed the warning and done nothing while her eldest daughter was poisoned in front of her. The video ended. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Derek moved. He had been standing by the window throughout the reading, and now he stepped forward. Everyone expected him to defend his wife, to make excuses, to find some way to explain away what we had all just seen. Instead, he turned to face me directly. "3 months ago, Candace told me she was meeting with a notary for your grandfather's estate planning. I asked why she needed to go alone. She said it was complicated, that I wouldn't understand." His voice was steady but hollow. I should have asked more questions. I saw things that didn't make sense, and I chose not to look closer. I chose not to know. He turned to look at Candace, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was the death of whatever love he had once felt for her. "I'm done." He walked out the front door without looking back. He didn't slam it. He just left quietly, finally, completely. Candace stood alone in the center of the room. Her husband had abandoned her. Her grandmother had exposed her. Her mother couldn't even look at her. And I, the sister she had tried to erase, was still standing. I spoke for the first time since the video ended. "I didn't come here for revenge," I said quietly. "I just wanted the truth to be seen." Grandma's voice came from the corner, soft but clear. "Your grandfather always knew who you really were, Candace. Both of you. That's why he made the choices he made." As Candace stood frozen in the middle of that room, abandoned, exposed, and utterly alone, she finally looked at me. There were no tears, no apology, no remorse. Just the slow, terrible realization that she had spent her entire life trying to destroy the one thing she could never have, Grandpa's unconditional love. She had gambled everything on erasing me, and she had lost it all. 1 week later, I stood in the bedroom that had never really felt like mine, folding clothes into a suitcase. The house was quiet now. A different kind of quiet than before, not the cold silence of being ignored, but the heavy stillness that follows destruction. Everything had changed. Nothing would ever go back to the way it was, and for the first time in my life, I was grateful for that. The news about Candace had spread through town faster than wildfire. She had been arrested 2 days after the will reading. The charges were severe attempted murder by poisoning and reckless endangerment. The prosecutor told me their case was strong. The fact that both of my EpiPens had been stolen proved premeditation. This wasn't a moment of panic or a terrible accident. This was a calculated plan to kill me. My own sister had looked at the calendar, seen that I was coming home, and decided that I would not leave alive. If convicted at trial, Candace faced up to 15 years in state prison. Her attorney was already negotiating a plea deal, trying to reduce the sentence to 3 to 5 years, with the possibility of parole. But that wasn't the end of it. The forgery investigation was separate and ongoing. Document fraud and will tampering carried an additional 5 to 10 years. The signature on Grandpa's will had been analyzed by experts, and they confirmed what we already knew: it was not his hand. Candace had forged it, probably during one of those secret meetings with the notary that Derek had mentioned. Speaking of Derek, he had filed for legal separation the day after he walked out of the will reading. He was cooperating fully with investigators, providing documentation of Candace's meetings and any financial records that might be relevant. I didn't feel sorry for him. He had admitted that he suspected something was wrong and chose not to ask questions. But I understood why he was doing this now. He was trying to save himself from being dragged down with her. Candace's real estate license had been revoked. Her reputation in town was destroyed. For the first time in her 33 years of life, she could not smile or charm her way out of consequences. The golden child had finally been seen for what she truly was, and there was nowhere left to hide. I was folding the last of my shirts when I heard footsteps in the hallway. I knew who it was before she appeared in the doorway. Mother stood there watching me pack her face drawn and tired. She looked like she had aged 10 years in the past week. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy for her, but that part was very small now and growing smaller every day. "Stephanie," she said. Her voice was hesitant, searching for the right words. "I need you to understand something. Candace was always fragile. Ever since she was a little girl, she needed more attention, more reassurance. I thought if I protected her enough, she would become the person I hoped she could be." She paused, and I could see her struggling. "When your grandmother told me that morning what she had heard, I didn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I thought she was exaggerating. I thought Candace was just stressed about money and saying things she didn't mean." I stopped folding. I turned to face my mother with a clarity I had never felt before. For 36 years, I had accepted her excuses. I had told myself that she didn't mean to favor Candace, that she was just trying to keep the peace, that she loved us both in her own way. But I was done lying to myself. "You didn't protect Candace," I said. My voice was calm, steady, final. "You enabled her. You watched her become a monster and called it sensitivity. You made excuses for her cruelty and called it stress. And you didn't fail to protect me, you chose not to. There's a difference between not knowing and not wanting to know. Grandma told you exactly what Candace was planning. She told you that morning that your daughter intended to hurt me, and you decided that it couldn't be true because believing it would mean admitting what Candace really was. You chose your comfort over my life." Mother opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. What could she say? There was no excuse that would erase what she had done. There was no apology that would undo her choice to look away while I was dying on her living room floor. I turned back to my suitcase and continued packing. After a long moment, I heard her footsteps retreat down the hallway. She didn't say goodbye. Neither did I. This was not a reconciliation. This was the end of pretending. When I was alone again, I sat down on the edge of the bed and pulled out Grandpa's letter. I had read it once before in the hospital, but I had been too overwhelmed to fully absorb his words. Now, in the quiet of this room, I read it again, from beginning to end. His handwriting was shaky, but determined, the script of a man who knew he was running out of time, but refused to leave without saying what mattered. "My dearest Stephanie," he wrote, "if you're reading this, something has happened, and I'm sorry I couldn't protect you myself. I want you to know the truth. You were the only one who saw me, not my money. You visited because you wanted to hear my stories, not because you were calculating your inheritance. I knew what Candace was becoming. I saw it years ago, and I was too weak to stop it. Your grandmother was braver than me. She never stopped fighting. But I want you to understand something important. My love for you was never about Candace's failures. It was about your heart. You reminded me of your grandmother when she was young, fierce, honest, and unwilling to be anyone other than herself. Don't let them make you small. Don't let them make you bitter. Use this inheritance to build the life they never imagined for you. Live loudly. Love freely. That will be my final victory and my greatest gift to you." I held the letter to my chest and let the tears come. Not tears of sadness, but tears of release. My whole life, I had wondered if I was worthy of love. I had wondered if there was something wrong with me, some flaw that made my family push me away. But Grandpa had seen me. He had always seen me. And he had made sure that even after he was gone, I would finally understand that I had never been the problem. I finished packing and carried my suitcase downstairs. Grandma was waiting by the front door. She looked small and fragile, but her eyes were bright, with something I recognized now as strength. She had been fighting for me all along, even when I didn't know it. I set down my suitcase and wrapped my arms around her, holding on longer than I ever had before. She cupped my face gently, her thumbs brushing away the last of my tears. "He knew you would survive this," she said softly. "He just wanted to make sure you knew why you deserved to." I looked at her, and a question that had been forming in my mind finally found its way to my lips. "Did you know about the addendum all along?" Grandma smiled, and there was a spark of mischief in her eyes that reminded me suddenly of Grandpa. Who do you think drove him to the hospital to sign it? I was his witness. His doctor was the other. Your grandfather and I planned it together. We knew something was wrong. We just didn't know how wrong until it was almost too late. I laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I had felt in what seemed like years. Of course, Grandma had been part of it. Of course, she had been protecting me even then. I hugged her one more time, promised to call when I reached Philadelphia, and walked out to my car. I put my suitcase in the trunk and slid behind the wheel. The engine started with a familiar rumble. As I pulled out of the driveway, I adjusted the rearview mirror and watched the house grow smaller behind me. I used to believe that family meant accepting whatever they gave you, the silence, the blame, the crumbs of attention they had left over. I spent 36 years trying to earn a place at a table that was never meant for me. But Grandpa's letter taught me the truth I had been too afraid to see. Real love doesn't ask you to disappear. It doesn't make you feel invisible. It sees you even when everyone else refuses to look. And for the first time in my life, I finally saw myself the way he always had, not as the forgotten sister, not as the one who didn't matter, but as someone worthy of being seen, worthy of being chosen, worthy of being loved without conditions. I pressed the gas pedal and watched the town shrink in my mirror. I wasn't going back to my old life. I was going forward to build a new one. Stephanie's story reminds us of a truth that too many people learn too late. Not everyone who shares your blood shares your best interests. Family is supposed to be a safe place, but for millions of people, it becomes the source of their deepest wounds. If you have ever been the invisible one, the scapegoat, the child who could never earn love that should have been freely given, please hear this. Their inability to see your worth says everything about them and nothing about you. The lessons from this story are clear. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Document everything. Grandma's decision to record that night saved Stephanie's life and exposed the truth. And most importantly, you are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they are family. Setting boundaries is not betrayal. It is survival. Real love does not make you feel small. It does not ask you to disappear so others can shine. It sees you, supports you, and celebrates who you are. If the people around you cannot offer that it is okay to build a new family, one you choose for yourself. Thank you for listening to Stephanie's story. If it touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. We would love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted? Share your story. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.